conversation explores the art of thinking beyond the obvious. And today I have my special guest. She's inclusion strategies as well as a debut author and the author of the book Including You, Leading Inclusion from Where You Are. No other than Ms. Delphia Howze.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on. I'm very excited.
Welcome, Ms. Delphia on Abstract Essay. And can you please introduce more about yourself that I missed?
Yes. So I'm Delphia Howze. I'm the author of the book Including You, Leading Inclusion from Where You Are. I've been doing the work of human resources, leadership, inclusion for more than 25 years in different sectors. And I've had the pleasure of working with leaders, HR professionals, uh, regular workers, so to speak, in trying to make sure that we produce the most productive and conducive environments for everyone. And at the core of all of that is inclusion, finding a space to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to be successful, recognizes their place in the environment, and the environment creates a level of value for them. So the book is really about creating the realization that we all have personal stake in inclusion. Inclusion begins with I for a reason. It gives us the opportunity to think about our personal role and responsibility and not wait and expect others to create and ensure that that type of environment is available. This is work that I love. This is work that I know is valuable. It's work that we need in today's world and all of the worlds that we have and will have. It's something that is for everyone.
And thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world, Ms. Delphia. Thank you. You spent over 2 decades as a DNI leader, isn't it? Or Chief Inclusion Officer, is it? A
Yes,
consultant.
yeah, chief inclusion officer. It's interesting because the words of diversity, inclusion,
Hmm.
engagement, that DEI have gotten so misconstrued, and everyone has just combined those letters together and have not really created the common language for what they are. If we separate the words and really look at them for what they mean, diversity is about the differences and similarities that we all have in any given environment. That's going to be present and prevalent in any environment. You think of a rose garden or a flower garden. You have a variety of flowers. That's diversity, right? You have different
Hmm.
elements there.
Hmm.
Inclusion is about what are we doing, the action to make sure that all of that diversity thrives and can be successful. So that's the soil. That's about creating the space where we ensure that there's water, the soil is fertilized for all of the different plants and all of the different elements in that garden. And then engagement is how do we beautify it, right? How do we make sure that there's beauty around it and create connectivity for all of those different types and create the landscape because they're all working together. So my role has always been about inclusion, that middle part. How do we bring all of that diversity together and create the beauty of the world?
Certainly, yeah, Ms. Delphia. So you're a consultant of Fortune 500 and SRM expert panelist. The entire infrastructure of a corporate inclusion is built on the premise that this work belongs to leaders and specialists. Your book argues the opposite. That this concentration on responsibility has created a passive workforce. At what point did you realize you were building the barricades of you're trying to unlock?
Yeah, yeah. I think that, I began to realize very early on that we really needed to create a space for everyone to be able to be a part of this. And so the work that I've done in the past with SHRM and as a panel expert and actually as an employee of SHRM, I've had the opportunity to recognize that, even with the policies, practices of an organization, and even with directives of organizations that say, we're going to do and focus on inclusion or diversity or all of those elements, those directives were not sustainable. And they weren't sustainable because we didn't create this space for every individual to be a part of it in a way that was meaningful. And so I think that early in my career, I began to recognize that. I didn't really know what it meant. What I couldn't put my finger on the exact challenges, but through my conversations over the years and my research with CEOs, with various leaders, and with employees, getting that perspective from all sides and all angles. That's how I came to the realization that, we may be looking at this a little incorrectly, and there may be opportunity for us to think about this a little differently.
Interesting, Miss Delphia. Howard Ross, who wrote the foreword for Reinventing Diversity, calls your use of the alchemy metaphor is simply brilliant. Why alchemy? What is it all about? Transformation, a base of metal into gold that mirrors the transformation of a passive workforce into an actively inclusive one. And what does the metaphor demand rather than a business case argument never could?
Yes, alchemy is something that is, to me, magical, right? And I work in the world of science, and the interesting thing about alchemy is that when you bring all of these wonderful things together, you can create something even more wonderful. So when you think about what I just said about the flower garden, the diversity that's there, when you bring all of those elements together and mold them and take care of them and nurture them, and ensure that you're bringing out the best in all of them, you get something that's so much greater, right? You get something that's stronger, that's sustainable, that's long standing, and that's valuable for every stakeholder, person, element that's involved. And so alchemy really speaks to the opportunity to bridge the gap from individual perspectives, individual identity, individual opportunities, to really thinking about how do we bring it all together and create that golden aspect of existence.
All said again, Ms. Delphia, you were a DNI leader. You were paid to be the expert. And when you wrote the book that says, essentially, the expert model is broken, everyone must lead, did you experience this realization as a liberation or as a betrayal of the identity you had built?
And so I'm going to ask you to say that one more time for me, please. I do apologize. Can you say that one more time?
No worries. You were a DI or DNI leader, right? So you were paid to be an expert. And then you wrote a book that says essentially the expert model is broken. Everyone must lead. Did you experience this realization as a liberation or as a betrayal of the identity that you had built?
Yes, thank you for that. Thanks for clarifying and restating that. Yes. So yeah, the mold. I do think that the mold was broken. I don't think that it was ever formulated completely. Right. A lot of organizations just, and I've witnessed this, and I've helped organizations get out of this mindset that because an individual is of a certain demographic, they should be the leader for diversity. They should be the leader of these types of things. That's not accurate. Not everyone has that interest, and we should not force someone into that role. I can't tell you how many people who have had roles as leaders for diversity, equity, inclusion, all of those things, who weren't prepared for it, who didn't want it, but it was an opportunity for them, and ultimately weren't successful. And so I do think that in many instances, maybe not all, but in many instances, we created a space where we said certain people should be in these types of roles. I think that's an absolute mistake. I think that has probably gotten us into the place of disdain that many have for it now, right? Because people begin to see preference and then ultimately exclusion, which is the opposite of what we want to do. And so I do think that the mold needed to be broken, and someone needed to say that we need to look within. We have we can take personal accountability, every single person, not just the leaders, not just the HR practitioners, not just the managers in the workplace. We shouldn't be sitting there crossing, pointing our fingers in opposite directions, waiting for someone to do something. We all have personal accountability to create that space where we want to be where we want to have inclusion. The worst thing in any environment is for any person to feel excluded for any reason, right? And when we have that, the thought process of exclusion, that is a painful, traumatic thing, right? Think about the first time you ever felt excluded. I encourage the audience to think about that too. Very first time you felt excluded. I can guarantee that you are not thinking of a situation where you came away saying, "Ooh, I want more of that." I want that to happen again, right? It was traumatic. And research has shown that when we have strong bouts of exclusion in our lives, that is equivalent to trauma in our lives. Why would we want that in the workplace? So everyone can create that space where we have inclusive opportunities to bring people into the fold. And it's not that we have to do something massive. We don't have to go and get a PhD in it and start a new program and start a new role or responsibility. We simply have to be human centric. We simply have to have human centric integrity, value the humans for who they are.
Very well said, Miss Delphia. You need an applause for that. For sure. Very well said. You're most welcome. One reviewer wrote that your book is challenged them to think critically about whose voices are being heard or whose needs are being met. I want to turn that lens on you, Miss Delphia. During the writing of this book, whose voice did you realize you had not been hearing, and what did it take to finally listen?
Yeah. The voices that I had not been hearing, I think, throughout my career are the voices, and this is very interesting. That's a great question. My first response is the voices of leaders. And here's why I say that. Leaders were afraid to ask the questions, right? You think of a CEO or a high profile individual who's leading a company, who's responsible for a number of people and the overall well-being of an organization. A lot of people are put into those roles because of their business acumen, their ability to, look at the numbers, look at the data, build, financial wealth for organizations, not necessarily for their ability to build relationships and create environments where people are valued. And so, what I recognized through my research and through my experiences is that the voices of leaders, of CEOs, of top executives were not being heard because they were afraid to be vulnerable and say that they just didn't know how to do this. They didn't know what to do or how to be a part of creating these environments. I'll never forget one executive said to me, "Well, you know, I, I don't fit the mold to even be able to talk about this. So I'm afraid to talk about this in public," right? How terrible that we've created environments where people can't be vulnerable and be able to ask the question of how can I do this most effectively? And because that question's not being asked, no one's hearing that question, we continue to go forward in less productive ways.
Interesting, Miss Delphia. The book is 174 pages in paperback and 145 in the Kindle edition. This is not exhaustive to me, or it is deliberate intervention. How do you decide what to exclude and what is relationship between brevity and authority in the field where performative depth often masquerades as expertise?
Yeah. It's interesting because, when I was writing the book, it was one of those things where we don't need, an extensive model or a 300-page dissertation in terms of what this is about. This is human behavior, right? And I think that if we think of it from that perspective, this is truly human behavior. So I tried to narrow it down as much as I possibly could and include real live scenarios that actually occurred in my experiences throughout my career. Um, these are not experiences that are made up. Of course, the names are not the same names of the individuals who experience this, but these are real life experiences and scenarios that can play out in any environment. And so when I was making the decision of what to include, what not to include, I mean, there's so much that I wanted to say, quite honestly. There's so many points and so many rabbit holes I could have gone down. But I wanted to be very as concise as I possibly could to make sure that I was bringing in real world experiences that other people could connect with and see themselves in, and realize that this isn't a problem of just those people. It's an us problem.
Ms. Delphia, multiple reviews mention self reflection exercises, scripts, tactics, and a comprehensive self reflection process. These are pedagogical tools, not just rhetorical ones. Walk me through the design of this single exercise. What is the question you ask? What is the cognitive friction it creates? And how did you test whether it's actually worked before you committed into the page?
Yeah, I think the pieces of self-reflection. It's easy. We can passively read anything, right? We
Mm.
can read a book and say, "Oh, okay, that was great," and we forget about it in over the next couple of weeks. But when you delve into something and you actually have to reflect on yourself and how you're playing a part in the efforts and in the opportunities, that's what creates sustainability in our brain, right? That's what creates the opportunity for us to realize that this is a part of me, and I'm a part of it as well. And so some of the questions that I ask, and also there's a excuse me, a 20 point guide, so to speak, bonus page to help people to identify how they can play a part and how they can actually create inclusive environments. But the questions are designed to get people to think about the questions throughout the book, I should say, are designed to get people to think about how they enter into this space and how they currently are seeing the world, right? And what they're putting out into the world. I talk about the opportunity to give pause in terms of that creating a space for people to be able to not just shut down a conversation as soon as we think that there's been an element of microaggression, right? But to give us some time to think about, okay, let's ask questions and let's help bring the conversation along so that we don't close people out. That's the worst thing that I believe right now we're doing is, as soon as someone from another side of perspective says something that we don't agree with, I'm done with you. I don't want to talk to you anymore. You don't agree with me? You're not a good person. You're terrible and you're one of them, right? Well, there's value in understanding what that perspective is, and potentially you're saying the same thing. And you could probably meet in the middle and continue the dialogue and go further. So those questions are throughout the book are designed to get individuals to think about where they sit in this space.
Ms. Delphia, the book published by Manuscripts LLC, not a legally or legacy business press. You had a platform, a track record, and institutional credibility. Why did you choose to self-publish or work with the independent press? And what did decision cost you in terms of distribution? And what did free you to stay that you could not have inside the traditional gate?
Yeah, yeah. I think this is my first blush out of the gate, right? And it's something that I've been thinking about this for a number of years. And actually, I had a number of leaders come to me and say, "Delphia, you've helped me so much. When are you going to write a book?" And I'm like, "Nah, I'm not going to write a book. Who wants to hear from me?" And so, I was actually working on my doctorate degree, and I thought. This is something that's heavy on my heart. And I wanted to do it now. And the window was in my mind, very short. Because if I didn't do it at that time, I know that, I would have moved on to something else and it would have taken even longer. So the decision to self-publish was an active decision, and I wanted to do it. I wanted to do it my way. I wanted to publish it and broadcast it and share it in the way that I felt was important because I do believe that again we've done a little bit of a disservice in the past in the way other in the way it's been the topic has been marketed in the past. So I wanted to do it. I wanted to do it my way. So I pulled out Frank Sinatra to do it my way.
Thank you for sharing anyway to the world, Miss Delphia. Thank you so much. And I hope more and more coming because for sure people will empower through your knowledge and wisdom. The phrase including you is direct address. It's a second person, present tense, imperative. It's also the title. At what point the writing process did you realize that the book was not about them, leaders, managers, HR, but about the individual readings holding the book? And what did the shift in address to do your voice as a writer?
That is a fantastic question. The book, when I started to write the book, my audience in my brain was CEOs, leaders. That's who I was writing the book for. As I said before, I had an executive come to me and say, "Hey, when are you going to write this book?" And so I was really initially thinking, "Okay, I'm writing it for them." But as I began to share the stories, and as I began to create the narrative that it's a personal accountability for every person, that's when I began to realize it's not just about one demographic group, leaders, or one culture or anything like that. It is really about every single person. And so probably maybe about a third of the way through the entire process, I began to shift my mindset from thinking it's only those individuals that I'm writing to realizing that I'm writing something to every single person. Anyone who picks up this book can see themselves in it, whether they see the experiences from a leadership perspective or from a managerial perspective or from an employee perspective. Heck, even from someone who, just wants to know. It is every single person who has had the experience at some point in their life of being excluded. That's a relatively accurate fact. Every person has had that feeling for one reason, that experience for one reason or another. So we all know what that's like. So because we all know what that's like, including you speaks to every single person.
Miss Tracy's Ray's reviews praise the book for helping readers recognize all of the ways in which you are able to lean in and make a positive difference. The word recognize is doing important work. You are not giving a people new capacities. You are helping them to see capacities they already have. Why is this recognition a more powerful intervention than training?
Yes, absolutely. I'm a facilitator as well. I love to help people to learn and grow. I don't believe in training. I believe that, we train animals, people are educated and they learn, right? And so, Tracy Shrey, that perspective of recognizing that you put in there, and thank you, Tracy, she's a wonderful person. And, thinking about the reality that to what you said, Daniel, we all know this. We learned a lot of this back in kindergarten, right? Don't bite, don't kick, don't talk, say bad words, don't say bad things about people, don't be mean, be kind. That's what we learned in elementary school, in kindergarten. We learned that as children. And then somewhere along the line, it was lost, right? It went away. Why, right? Why does that happen? So the recognition kind of takes us back to the root of what we learned of how to be kind to one another, how to value one another. I don't know of any elementary school that or any kindergarten teacher that tells their children to go and exclude another child in the classroom. I hope, let me say, I hope that that doesn't happen. Let's say that. Um, but the opportunity to recognize that we've heard this before, we know in our heart of hearts what it feels like and how wonderful it could be. but we don't practice it daily. And we don't practice it daily. Why? Simply because it hasn't, as we get older, we have responsibilities, we're seeing different things in the world. That's wonderful. But how can we get back to the roots of human centric integrity, right? Valuing people and recognizing the opportunity to eliminate exclusion as much as we can and bring inclusion into the work, into our environments. I have a daughter who is phenomenal and wonderful. I say that as a mom, right? And, I would never teach her or expect her to carry principles of exclusion. And I don't want her to be in environments of exclusion, right? So as a mother, it's important to me to ensure that I'm doing what I can to help create awareness and recognition that we know what to do. It's the choice to do better. My grandmother used to say, "Oh, when you know better, you'll do better." Well, I'm going to say she's wrong, right? Love you, grandma. She's no longer here on this earth, but I'm going to say she's wrong. The reality is, when we know better, when we bring it into recognition, we have a choice to do better. And so I'm just asking people to make that choice to do better in the vein of humanity and each other.
To do better, people, not to be arrogant. I think
Yes.
it's the place to be an arrogant. Most of the people today is being arrogant. Oh my goodness. So let's
Yes.
empower them, Miss Delphia. Create more books, please, like this. So before we wrap up our discussion for today, I'm inviting you to please do listen to my other podcast, people. My other podcast, because my abstract essay is already in sixth season, abstract poetry in third season, and my book 101 review in sixth season too, comedy 101 fourth season, and my food 101 in sixth season as well. Geography 101, love letters, movie 101 review, music 101 are in fifth season, science 101, sex 101 fourth season, spiritual awakening 101, trivia 101, law 101, mental health 101, motivation 101, entrepreneurship 101, and of course my Bible verses 101 are my baby podcasts. Please listen to them wherever you listen your podcasts. So, Miss Delphia, you are also a adjunct instructor, isn't it? Teaching the next generation of leaders. What do your students understand about inclusion that your corporate clients still resist? And what have you engaged or changed in your consulting practice because of what you taught you?
Yeah, yeah. The next generation realizes that this is inevitable, right? This is just what it is, right? The beauty of all of the differences and diversity that we have upon us is a wonderful thing. And so that's what I think they recognize and they carry with them because they're young. The older generation, they're bringing a lot more baggage with them. So I think that we have that opportunity to bridge that gap.
Certainly reach that gap for sure. And Ms. Delphia, can you please invite our listeners to support your book, your advocacy, your business, or anything you want to promote on Abstract Outside?
Yes, absolutely. Everyone knows that inclusion begins with I and always need you. We support including you. Need an inclusion from where you are. You can find it on Amazon. You can find it in bookstores, Barnes and Noble. You can also go to my website, The House Solutions, LLC, thehousesolutions.com. And you can learn more information, get more information, and also buy the book there.
Yes, people, let's support Miss Delphia Howze because if you support her, for sure, more and more inclusion like these two guys. I have one more question, Miss Delphia. One reviewer said, don't keep this information to yourself. But this information is not secret. The resistance is not ignorance, it's avoidance. Why do people who know they should share ownership of inclusion still hoard it? And what does the hoarding actually protect them from?
Yeah, that's a great question. Some people are not comfortable being vulnerable, right? We've been conditioned in some situations that, we have to stay in boxes. We have to, adhere to certain labels, and we have to, let other people do things that we are not absolutely perfect and familiar with. This is an imperfect thought process, right? There's no perfection. There is only consideration, care, value and appreciation for differences. So I think that the idea of hoarding is more connected for those who do it, more connected with discomfort and lack of comfort with vulnerability.
Very well said, Miss Delphia. I hope my guest is always like you. So I have one more question. You spent 2 decades as an expert, consultant, a chief officer. You have written a book arguing that expertise must be distributed, not hoarded. If this book succeeds, if organizations actually embrace the including you paradigm, what happens to your own role? What does the chief inclusion officer do in a world where everyone leads inclusion from where they are?
I just get to go and live on the beach and sit and just appreciate everyone that's there. Yes. I'll always, I'm a constant learner, a continuous learner, and I'm definitely someone who loves to connect. So if that happens, I will be out there, celebrating with all the people who appreciate the world of inclusion and who are doing their best to create that type of environment. Absolutely.
Miss Delphia Howze. People, let's support her so that, well, our worlds become more peaceful and more productive for sure. So, Miss Delphia, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Likewise. More to come, people. See you soon.